Welcome. And this is actually the second recording this morning, and I started off in the wrong place. So I'm going to make the bracha again, and then I'm going to say another bracha so as to try not to make a wasted, what would be called a bracha levatala, a blessing for no purpose. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
Amen.
And that second blessing, in a way, is to try and say that I didn't mean any disrespect to God by doing this. And now we're going to try and start at the right place. So you are seeing a very human side. These very human sides are being recorded as well. So, all right, here goes. Va'as Aron atzei shitim, and I made an ark of acacia wood, and I tried to have a picture of, let me see if I have a picture of an acacia tree for you to see. One moment. Okay, hold on a second. Let's see here. Yeah, 1 second here. Okay. One moment. I'm going to have to try and find this. Okay, there we go. Let's see what we can do here. And here we are. I'm going to show it to you. Acacia wood and acacia trees, etc. One moment. I'm going to be sharing. Okay. I was hoping, oh, yep, there it is. So can you see this, by the way? Are you able to see it?
No.
No.
All right, give me
Here.
hold on a second. 1 second. Okay. I see. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So here's the examples of this. And so here's some pictures of acacia woods, of acacia trees, in case you want to buy any, right? But so you can see that general shape of the tree. But this also had pictures of the acacia wood, which I thought was interesting to see. Excuse me. Yeah. Right. So just some various lovely pictures of it. Interesting. Well, there's some up close. All right, let's go to. I'm going to go back to our passage.
Is there anything, by the way, I mean, the shape is so interesting of an acacia tree.
Yes.
So is there anything to do with the shape related to any of this?
You know, I haven't done any study on it, so I really don't know. I'm not aware of it. You know, at this point, I don't know if it's because they found it. It does look like the tree does grow in scrubland. So, you know, it means, was it something that was available to them in the desert when they were wandering, as opposed to the gold and the silver, which I assume they took with them when they spoiled Egypt, despoiled Egypt, which we read about. So that's a thought anyway. But beyond that, I'm not really sure, other than to show you what the tree looked like and to see that it actually has a very beautiful grain to it. So, and quite possibly it's long lasting because it's relatively dry. You know, that was another concern too. So,
Cool.
thank you. If sol shnei luchot avanim karishonim, right? And I carved out two tablets of stone like the first, va'al hahara, and I went up to the mountain, ushnei haluchot biyadi, with the two tablets in my hand. By the way, again, this karishonim, right? We discussed the significance of that particular word yesterday, that the idea that despite the terrible sin that the Israelites had committed in worshiping the golden calf. I mean, that is pretty much the antithesis. Idolatry is considered to be the absolute opposite of the worship of the ultimate creator. And despite that fact, they were going to have a second chance, and how important it is to be able to have that. So just that karishonim, like the first. Let's take a look at, let's see. All right. So we've got quite a bit of text to look at before we get to a Rashi.
I can't understand, Rabbi, why Aaron, Moses' brother, did not stop them.
That's a very good question. And the reason is that he knew that if he tried, they would kill him.
Oh.
They were so crazed at that particular moment out of fear, out of the one day that they had miscalculated so many, right? We know for a fact that 99% of, or maybe 90% of the horrible things that happen come from miscommunication and misunderstanding. And when Moses said 40 days and 40 nights, he wasn't including the first day that he went up the mountain itself. They thought he was. And so when he came one day late, according to their calculation, he didn't show up. On the day they thought he was going to show up, they lost. They lost all faith. That's not saying that it's a reason, not an excuse. But anyway, Aaron did not want them to be guilty of killing a high priest on top of everything else. So that's the reason given in the tradition. And that's why he tried to stop them by saying, give me your jewelry. And he thought because the old joke about my money or your life, I'm thinking about it, that he thought by asking them for their jewelry and their gold, they wouldn't want to do it. They might think twice about it. In fact, their wives did not want to give up their jewelry, and the women are not considered to have been blamed for the sin of the golden calf. It was basically the men who were considered guilty of the sin of the golden calf, because they were happy to give up their jewelry for that, but their wives did not want to have their jewelry removed. So thank you for asking the question, Harlan, and I hope that answers it satisfactorily.
It does. Thank you.
Okay. So here we go. Vayichtov al haluchot, and he wrote on this. Is Moses, of course, telling them God wrote on the tablets kamichtav harishon, like the first writing, et aseret hadvarim, the 10 statements, asher diber Hashem aleichem, which the Lord spoke to you, right? This is underlining the fact that initially the Israelites had actually heard God speaking, right? Those first 2 commandments, we know, just to review that for a moment, is that the first 2 commandments are in the first person, right? You shall have no other gods before me, whereas the remaining 8 commandments are in the third person. They refer to God in the third person. Okay, which the Lord spoke to you on the mountain, mitoch ha'esh, from the midst of the fire, Beyom HaKahal, on the day of assembly. Excuse me 1 second. So I want to focus a little bit of why it mentions, again, these phrases that don't necessarily seem to be so important, and so that why are they in the text, right? The 10 statements, it's from the mountain, from the midst of the fire. What's the significance of the fact that God is telling them that it was on the mountain and that was from the midst of the fire? So we've talked about the significance of a mountain, and the idea of it representing a high place, and a high place spiritually. In other words, that these commandments come from a very high source in terms of how, if one does them, one practices them, it helps one attain a high spiritual place. But they are ideal. So that's another meaning of the mountaintop, right? That they represent in a sense idealism, right? Now, what about from the midst of the fire? Well, one of the symbolic elements of fire, of course, we know that fire burns you, but we also know that fire is a very ancient way of changing state of something, right? You change raw food into edible, cooked food through the process of fire. And fire, of course, was one of the most important developments towards human civilization. And so it has a lot of symbolism involved in that kind of thing. We also know, as I said, there's also the negative side of being burned, meaning that if you don't use fire judiciously, you can't just use it wholesale without any concern and any care. But nevertheless, the idea of the Torah being able to change our state, that we no longer are simply animals, but it allows us a process of becoming human beings. And so I think that the Torah using this phrase, this expression here, is to suggest to us what Torah is capable of doing, along with the fact that we need to be considerate and careful as to how we apply it. Vayitnem Hashem Elai, and the Lord gave them to me, right? He gave these statements that were now carved on the tablets to me. And the whole idea, again, this incredible symbolism of something that's in heaven and bringing it down to the earth, down into this physical realm, is, in a way, captures the whole spirit of Judaism and of the Israelite religion here in the Torah itself, and as it subsequently is developed. Again, the idea of Jerusalem being in at least that known time, the center of the earth, of the populated earth, and the idea of Jerusalem being, in a sense, the navel, and representing this point at which God's presence could come into this world. And of course, there's so many other ideas that get captured with that idea, having to do with purpose of life and finding great meaning in our own existence. Anyway, Va'efen, and I turned, so he had to turn away from this particular experience, right? Va'ered min hahar, and I came down from the mountain, right? These verbs, to go up, to come down, also have very strong spiritual meanings behind them. Va'asim et halochot, and I placed the tablets, ba'aron, in the ark, in the box, asher asiti, which I had made. And Rashi told us, I believe it was yesterday, that this was a different ark. This was something that went out actually with them to battle. It wasn't the ark that Bezalel made, but at least Vahiyusham, and they were there, Ka'asher Tzivani Hashem, just as the Lord had commanded me. So interesting, again, all these things that we can ponder. Is there significance in them being in the box? So the point is that they weren't on display, right? They were put inside a box. And again, I think there are other sort of spiritual messages in that we shouldn't be on display, that our religiosity doesn't need to be on display. It is something that we need to carry deep within ourselves and apply it in a way that makes us kind and devoted and thoughtful, etc., and not necessarily to show off. So I think those are some of the ideas of why these sentences are here in the text. And it's just one approach, obviously, of many that one can make. And now we appear to go into, this doesn't seem to be part of the speech, but I think you're going to see that the way Rashi is going to interpret this is that in a way it is part of Moses' speech to them. Uvnei Yisrael nasu, and the children of Israel journeyed, mi be'erot b'nei Yaakan, from the wells of b'nei Yaakan, Mosera to Moserot, or whatever it's called, right? Sham mate Aharon, there Aaron died. And you already may be puzzled because we heard that Aaron died at Hor Hahar, and this is Mosera. So we're going to have to try to understand why it's saying that. Vayikaver Sham, and it goes on to say, and he was buried there. So Rashi has some explaining to do, as he's going to do anyway. Vayichahen Elazar b'no tachtav, and Elazar his son served as priest in his stead, in his place. So here we are going to have a Rashi, as you can see, and he has quite a bit to say. Excuse me. So this sentence, the children of Israel journeyed from Be'erot Bnei Yakan to Mosera. Ma inyan ze lakan. He says, what's this? We've just had these statements about the process of the Ten Commandments, etc. And what on earth is this doing here? Why is this sentence in this place? It seems out of place. V'od, another question. And wait a second, if you actually read the journeys of the children of Israel, did they in fact journey from Be'erot Bnei Yakam to Mosera? When in fact, in Numbers chapter 33, as you'll see, it says they actually journeyed from Mosera to Bnei Yakam. Shinemar, as it states, Vayisumi Mosrot v'Gomer. It says explicitly they journeyed from Mosrot to Bnei Yakan. So we've got to explain this stuff. V'od. Okay, we've got a third issue. Sham mate Aharon. Aaron died there. V'alo b'hor har mate. We already mentioned this, right? He didn't die in there in Bnei Yakan, right? He died in Hor Har. Tzei v'chashov. If you go and figure it out, v'timtza, and you will actually be able to find shmona masaot, that there were 8 journeys, 8 stages of journey, mi Mosrot lahor hahar, from Mosrot to Hor Hahar. Ella, however, af zo min hatochacha. If you want to understand this whole statement and why it's here, it's also a statement of correction. And the book of Devarim, if you go back to our first lesson regarding the book of Devarim, it mentions a whole bunch of places, some of which have never been mentioned before, and the traditional interpretation, as Rashi mines out from those statements, is they're all implied corrections of what the Jewish people did wrong. And of course, why it wasn't done explicitly is because in the process of correction, you still want to be respectful. And so this also, by talking about place names, Moses was correcting them, as we're going to work out, but at the same time was doing it in this respectful kind of way. Okay, so he's saying, this is what Moses is telling them. V'od zot asitem, and this, moreover, you did, right? Keshemet Aharon b'Hor Hahar, when Aaron died at Hor Hahar, the Sof Arba'im Shana, at the end of 40 years. In other words, what this is saying, as I'm understanding it, is that Moses is telling them, not only did you do things that caused your previous generation to have to die out in the 40 years, but even at the end of that 40 years, even when the punishment was over, it didn't stop you from going ahead and doing other stuff that was major, of a major sin, right? V'nistalku, and at the end of those 40 years, v'nistalku ananei kavod, and when the clouds of glory, meaning these clouds, this presence of God, nistalku, disappeared. So because they were there, what we're saying is that an individual who acts in an extremely righteous way acts as a protection to the entire community. That we don't just live for ourselves, that whatever righteousness we try to embody is something which the entire community benefits from. So, Yeretem lachem mimelchemet melech Arad. What happened was, remember when we read about that, the king of Arad attacked them, and it says they were fearful, you were fearful from the war with the king of Arad. Unatatem rosh. Now, Safaria translates that as you appointed a leader. I'm going to finish this phrase, lachazor leMitzrayim, to return to Egypt. Now, I realize that you can certainly translate that But I've always also understood this as meaning, and you made a decision to head towards Egypt, or that you took it on your own heads. In other words, the unatatem rosh, right, in a sense, is saying you rebelled. It's another way of saying, you decided for yourselves that that's what was the right thing to do instead of listening to God. And I really feel that this phrase unatatem rosh is actually an idiom to mean you rebelled. V'chazartem la'achorechem, and you retreated, you went back, you returned backwards. Shmona masaot, 8 stages. Ad Bnei Yaakam. You went all the way back to Bnei Yaakam. Umisham leMosera, and from there you went to Mosera. Sham nilchamu lachem Bnei Levi, and at that particular location, the sons of Levi, the tribe of Levi, battled against you. There was a civil war, in a sense, between the sons of Levi and the other Israelites. V'hargu mikem, and they killed some of you. V'atem mehem, and you killed some of them. Ad shehechaziru etchem, until they were able to force you to return. B'derech chazartchem, in the way that you went back. In other words, that you had to go back over the area, over the way in which you had retreated. Umisham chazatem hagudgoda, and from that point you went back to Gudgod, who Chor Hagidgad. That is Chor Hagidgad. And I have a feeling that what Rashi is trying to tell us is that that's Hor Hahar. Okay, let's just see. Okay. We are going to have to, we only have a few more minutes. So he goes on and he's going to go this further. So let me leave this here. I'm going to put in the little marking, and we will, hold on a second. I'm going to mark the place. Okay, here. And we're going to mark the Rashi that we have there, right there. So this is where we will continue, God willing, tomorrow. And I'm going to stop the share. So, any comments for the record then? Okay, very good.